All right, let's talk about one of the most stubborn and honestly dangerous attack methods inside corporate networks: Kerberoasting. It's a super stealthy technique that can let an attacker take over, well, everything, starting from just one single low-level account. Now, what's kind of wild about Kerberoasting is that it's not some new cutting-edge exploit. It was first detailed way back in 2014. And yet, here we are, and it's still a go-to favorite for ransomware gangs and other attackers. The fact that it's stuck around this long, that should tell you just how effective it really is. So that brings us to the big question, right? What exactly is Kerberoasting? And why, after all these years, is it still such a massive headache for security teams? At its heart, it's an attack on Active Directory, which is pretty much the brain of most corporate networks. You can think of it as a privilege escalation trick. It lets an attacker who's maybe gotten a hold of one regular user's password jump all the way up to being a full-blown domain administrator. The stakes here are as high as they. So, how does this whole thing actually work? Let's get into the nuts and bolts. It all comes down to a very specific and surprisingly common little feature in Active Directory. The whole attack hinges on something called a service principal name, or an SPN for short. The easiest way to think about it is like a label. Let's say you have a service, like a SQL database, and you need it to run under a specific account. You create an SPN to tie that service to a user account. It's basically telling the network, hey, this user account right here, SVC_backup, is responsible for running this database service. Okay, and right there, that's the flaw. By design, any authenticated user on the network, anyone, it doesn't matter how low their privileges are, can ask the network's gatekeeper, the domain controller, for a service ticket for any account that has one of these SPN labels. And the domain controller just says yes. It hands over this little piece of encrypted data called a ticket. So the attacker just follows these 4 simple steps. First, they find a user account with an SPN. Second, they ask for its ticket. Third, they get the ticket. And here's the kicker. That ticket is encrypted with the service account's own password hash. So for step 4, the attacker just takes that ticket offline, back to their own machine, and starts trying to crack the password. And this is exactly why the attack is so sneaky. I love this analogy. It's like the attacker walks into your building, politely asks for a locked safe, and you just give it to them. They take the whole safe home to work on cracking it. All of the brute forcing, all of the password guessing happens on their computer. Your security systems? They don't see a thing. No failed login alerts, no alarms, nothing. It was just one legitimate request. All right, let's walk through what this looks like in the real world. We're going to follow an attacker's journey from a nobody on the network all the way to holding the keys to the kingdom. So it starts with getting a foothold. Maybe an employee, we'll call him Bob, clicks on a phishing link. Now the attacker has Bob's password. They log in, start looking around, and bingo, they find a service account called SVC Backup that has an SPN. They run the Kerberoasting attack, grab the ticket, and start cracking. And if that service account has a weak password, well, once they crack it, they discover it's a domain admin. And just like that, it's game over. Just look at this transformation. The attacker starts out as Bob, who can barely do anything on the network. But after one quick, totally silent Kerberoasting attack, they become the SVC backup user who has complete control over everything. It's an absolutely massive jump in power, all from one tiny misconfiguration. Okay, so that's the threat. It's pretty scary, for sure, but it is not a lost cause. So let's shift gears and talk about what you can actually do to build some solid defenses and protect your network from this exact kind of attack. We're going to focus on 3 main lines of defense. First, and this is the big one, is all about password strength. Second, you've got to be actively looking for these risky accounts. And third, we can get a little clever and set up some traps for the attackers using honeypots. Let's break each of these down. Let's start with auditing. When you go looking for these things, you have to know what you're looking for. The danger is when an SPN is set on a user account. Now, you're going to see SPNs on computer accounts too, but you can ignore those. Why? Because computer accounts have these super long, super complex passwords that get changed automatically all the time. They are, for all practical purposes, uncrackable. So your audit needs to focus only on user accounts that are being used as service accounts. Now for my favorite part. A really smart, proactive defense. The honeypot SPN. It's simple. You just create a fake service account, give it a juicy-sounding name and an SPN, and then you just watch it. Since no real business process should ever touch this account, the very moment you see a request for its service ticket, You know with almost 100% certainty that someone is scanning your network for Kerberoasting vulnerabilities. It's a perfect little tripwire. Look, auditing and honeypots are awesome for detection, but of all the things you can do, the simplest and most effective solution should always be your top priority. So let's really zero in on the one thing that will stop Kerberoasting dead in its tracks. This number. This is what you need to remember. 25 plus. For any user account that absolutely must have an SPN, you need to give it a password that is at least 25 characters long and make it complex. Why? Because a password that long makes cracking that offline ticket pretty much impossible for an attacker with current technology. You're not actually fixing the flaw in the protocol, you're just making it impossible to exploit. And really, that's the whole philosophy here. You can implement all sorts of complex detection tools, but strengthening those service account passwords is number one with a bullet. It hits the attack right where it hurts, that final critical step. Because even if an attacker can get the ticket, what good is it if they can never, ever crack it? So I'll leave you with this final thought. An attacker only has to get lucky one time. They just need to find a single forgotten service account with an SPN and a lazy password. So the question you really need to be asking yourself right now is this. How many of those accounts are lurking in your network? And could one of them be the one weak link that leads to a complete and total compromise?